One of the things that can make or break an educator is their ability to communicate with the public, to talk to people, to meet them where they are. And so you've got a lot of training, a lot of knowledge. I know you're excited, but you've still got to make that connection with people. You've still got to get in the door. And so one of the things we're going to talk about today is probably one of the hardest parts about being a Master Wellness Volunteer and doing extension education in the community, and that is actually talking to people out in the community. And so you're all excited because you're ready to get going, and you've already started thinking about opportunities. But then once you actually get into those opportunities, maybe panic sets in. Oh my gosh, here I am. I've done all this work and I've made all this progress, but now I'm actually going to have to talk to someone. And as somebody who, on a fairly regular basis, walks into a room that he's never seen before, speaks to a group of people that he's never seen before and may never see again, on a topic that, is well-versed, but is it going to connect with people? Is it going to flop? Are they going to think that I'm funny? Are they going to think that I'm silly? I can tell you that it is one of the hardest parts of my job. But many people run away from public speaking because they're afraid of talking in front of other people. And in fact, speaking in public ranks as one of the #1 fears that a lot of adults have. But, you are there in your capacity as a Master Wellness Volunteer. I'm there in my capacity as the program specialist. The county extension agent is there in his or her capacity as the county extension agent because you're a subject matter expert and you've got really great information that people want, they need, and you can make a difference in your presentation. And so that should give you confidence that maybe the panic button doesn't need to be hit until 20 minutes into your presentation and they're not laughing at your jokes. But you are there as that expert, and you were there to share your passion for your subject and be an advocate for something that you care about. When you look at research behind what goes into making a really effective presentation, it kind of looks something like this pyramid, or something that resembles a bunch of blocks and a pyramid. You've got your foundations, your preparation, your practice, and then eventually up to effective public speaking. Your public speaking foundations include the purpose of the presentation you're going to give, the topic you've selected, and analyzing your audience. And all those things we're going to cover in a little more detail here in a minute. But really, what is the purpose? You're there to educate. You're there to hopefully help move people along toward behavior change. Your topic is going to be just as important, because if they've asked you to come talk about my plate, sure, you might want to talk about combining physical activity with nutrition, but you probably shouldn't take the Walk Across Texas presentation to talk to them about the importance of physical activity if they've asked you to come do something on my plate. By the same token, if you've chosen my plate as a topic, if they say, oh, well, just come talk to us about anything, we just want you to come share a program with us, be thoughtful in it. Think about something that is going to be well received. Think about something that you can provide them some action items, and then think about something that really well, that you're well versed in, that's going to give you the confidence to stand up and represent Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and your county and the Master Wellness Volunteer Program, and do justice to the presentation. And then think about your audience. Is it a professional audience? Is it a non-professional audience? Are you there as a peer? So you're speaking to, maybe the group to which you belong, or are you there as an outsider? Is it a formal presentation? Is it not? All of the various considerations that you have related to the audience, the venue, and the type of presentation that you're giving. For your preparation, some of that is already baked into the mix when you're delivering programs that have been developed by Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. We know that the programs that we deliver are probably, really well researched. they're probably pretty well organized, and that you have support behind you in the form of the county extension agent in the county where you're working, in the form of the specialist or the author that put the program together. You are able to reach out to find additional information, to anticipate maybe questions that you're going to be asked. These things are kind of baked in for you, so that should give you confidence. Now, that doesn't mean that you don't need to rehearse, which gets up to our next block in the pyramid where we're practicing. We want to practice our verbal delivery, and we don't want to practice our nonverbal delivery. Our verbal delivery is kind of the familiarity with the topic so that, it kind of flows off the tongue. I find that as a presenter, if I developed the presentation, it goes really well because it's something that I'm familiar with. I can throw in some anecdotes. I can anticipate what's coming next with the presentation, so there feels like there's a flow. If it's something that I haven't developed, I really do have to read through it and practice. What am I going to say here? How am I going to talk to somebody about this? What kind of example can I provide that's going to really help relate to someone? And then that helps give me confidence so that my voice and my tone conveys, I know what I'm talking about. And I am here to be the subject matter expert to provide you with this education on whatever your topic may be. You also need to think about your nonverbal delivery. And this is something that also probably takes a little practice with looking and feeling relaxed. Because believe it or not, just like you've noticed when someone is nervous on the stage before or at the front of the room, people are going to be able to pick up that, maybe you're not comfortable with it. And again, the more you're comfortable with the material, the more relaxed you're going to be as part of your delivery. They're going to want to see expression on your face, maybe hand movements. And that also goes into like your audience analysis and knowing where you're going to be doing this. I will admit to you that as a presenter, I am at my worst when I have to stand behind a podium. If I can't move across the stage, if I can't use my hands to convey the message to you, and even right now, if you are in this tiny little conference room with me right now, I'm standing up speaking to you. I'm using my hands. I'm actually wearing my baseball cap because these are all things that help me be a better presenter. And so as part of my audience analysis and my site selection and determining where I'm going to host a program, I ask questions like, is there a podium? Is that the only microphone that's available? Can I have a mic that I can wear on my clothing? I tend to walk when I do a presentation. Is there a projector and a screen? Because if I'm going to display a presentation, it's going to be something that I want easy access to because I have a tendency to point. And again, right now, I mean, you can't see it, but I'm pointing at something that doesn't exist because my hands tend to mimic what I'm talking about. And so these are all part of nonverbal elements that can help make or break your speech. Again, when I have to stand behind a lectern, instinctively my hands grab the side of it, and if I don't check myself, I find that I'm actually white knuckling the podium, and that is not the type of presenter that I am, but it's just something about that piece of furniture there on the stage that causes me to grab on and hold on for dear life, and then the presentation just kind of goes downhill from there. So, working on nonverbal elements of your presentation can also be helpful. And then that leads us up to the very top where we're being an effective public speaker. So let's delve a little bit more into some of those key questions that we need to ask and things that we need to look for. Planning is key. And part of planning is asking the right questions. So you've been in contact with someone who wants you to come do a presentation, or you've reached out to someone who you want to go do a presentation for them. There are still a lot of questions that need to ask, and some of these may sound basic, but again, as someone who more often than not as I had to call the day before and say, what time again? Where are we going? Or I'll commit to something and it goes on my calendar, but I forget to confirm the location, or I'm doing something in a different time zone. So I don't know if, I don't remember if I saw our friends in El Paso County on the session today, but Texas actually has 2 time zones. And so it does make a difference if I'm doing something for a county in far West Texas. So asking to confirm the date and time and location are going to be very important. And, you know, I find that if it's not in my email, it often doesn't make it into my calendar. So even if I call or someone calls me, I often follow up with an email just so there's a paper trail that helps me understand and remember what's going on. It's also important to confirm the length and the audience. You know, how long am I going to be speaking? Do I need to leave time for questions afterwards? What is the audience? Is it a professional audience? Is it a non-professional audience? You know, are they older, younger, and maybe that doesn't affect how you deliver your presentation, but it may affect the topic that you choose. Is it formal or informal? I find the more I'm in my position, which, in case you were wondering, I've been in this job for 15 years, 2 days ago, so I'm very excited. I almost am reluctant to take a PowerPoint with me sometimes, especially if I know it's an informal presentation. If I'm just standing around in a group of people talking to them about something, I'll often just speak from my handout because I find that in an informal setting, people respond differently if I throw a presentation up on the screen. All of a sudden they feel maybe intimidated, or that it's not informal, or that they can't converse with me as the presenter. And as a presenter, I'm the type of person that really likes questions. I'm the type of presenter that I really want to hear what you want to know rather than what I think you should know. And so, you know, in an informal setting, having that script or that PowerPoint up on the screen can sometimes be a barrier to the audience participating in the presentation. By the same token, if I'm asked to come do an in-service for Adult Protective Services caseworkers, or to teach a class for a nursing class or something like that, I will often always develop a PowerPoint presentation or take along something to be shown on a projector. A, because a formal and a professional audience probably expects that, and B, you know, I'm likely to be quote unquote the sage on the stage. You know, it's probably going to be a larger room and you know, more people and less interaction, and so that presentation helps keep the audience engaged with what I'm talking about, even though we can't really connect one-on-one. How many people is also important. Again, if it's a big, large room with lots of people, you may want that formal presentation because you're going to want something you can put up on a screen so everybody can see. But at the same time, I joke that it's not an extension program if you don't have a handout. And so determining the number of people that are going to be there is going to let you prepare any kind of handout or documentation that you want to take with you to the event. And then the name and contact information from the person requesting. Again, that's something that always ends up in my calendar because, like I said, invariably a day or a couple of days before, I'm having to call and get in touch to confirm some of the details, and knowing who to get in touch with is important. It's also important to remember that facilities vary wildly. Again, you know, a big part of my job is walking into a room I've never seen before and trying to do a presentation, and I like to think that I'm pretty resilient, but even sometimes things catch me off guard, like a column in the middle of the room, or a column that I have to work around to show my presentation, or you know, it's a huge room but there's no microphone, or there's a huge room and it's a terrible microphone. So be prepared for that. Don't let that catch you off guard. That also is an opportunity for you to take a test drive. You know, make arrangements with the organizer to say, hey, can I come by and take a look at the facility and make sure that I'm prepared. Give yourself time to get there early and set up, especially if you're having to bring your own technology, because an extension cord may be needed, or worse, you may get there and find there are no plugs. There's no blank wall or screen to put your presentation on, and their projector is broken anyway, so you wouldn't be able to use it. And in that moment, you might panic, hit the panic button, but that's when you have practiced and you're planned and you're flexible, and we're going to go to plan B, and we're just going to talk from the handout. And so my presentation today is going to be more conversational than maybe I would have planned. Ask about things like screens and plugs and audiovisual equipment. And these are all things that you can probably have access to through your county extension office. But, you know, ask if the facility has it, because if they've got their own equipment, it would be great if you could just walk in with a flash drive with your presentation on it and your stack of hands out. And again, be flexible and take adversity in stride. You know, they're not trying to set you up for failure. They're not trying to make your life difficult, or hopefully they're not anyway. But, you know, these things happen, and they happen to the best of us. Even if everything goes well, you know, sometimes the computer crashes or PowerPoint freezes or something like that, and take these things in stride. Make a joke out of it. The audience will often resonate with you and sympathize with you and empathize with you, and they're going to be right there with you through it all. But be flexible, because unintended things are going to happen when you put yourself out there in front of people. It's also important to prepare for success. And so one of the easiest ways to be a successful educator or public speaker is to know your topic and be familiar with it. And, you know, that can come from reading and rehearsal. Our brains really like rehearsal. Our brains really like for things to be the same over and over and over again. And so reading a presentation over and over again can help you be familiar with it. And it can also help you personalize it. You know, that's an opportunity for you to incorporate maybe a funny story about something that happened at your house. You noticed that this morning with Dr. Anding's presentation. Of course, she prepared that presentation, so she has an opportunity to build in whatever elements that she wants, but she helped connect with you through showing you scenes from her home, like food that she's got on her table or in her refrigerator, or connecting with you about her husband and her son on the fly. And the reason she's able to do that is because she's familiar enough with the topic that she knows what's coming next, or she knows to introduce something that's going to help connect with the audience, make it more personal. Start with a central theme and build. You know, and that's something, again, that's going to be baked into the mix a little bit with extension programming. We often take a structural approach to the way we put a presentation together, and so we'll hit relevance, response, and results. So we'll talk to you about why something's important, and then we'll provide, you know, a lot of information about what you can do with it, and then we'll talk to you about results or expected outcomes or next steps. And you can see that a little bit in the image on the right side. So your intro, you know, is to capture attention and show enthusiasm. Your body is to provide facts and lead the audience from something that's unknown to known. And then your conclusion is to summarize your main points, to recap a little bit, and to offer to answer questions. It's kind of like if we were going to talk to you about a house fire, and you know, sure, it would be really important for you to understand how combustion works. But one of the things that we're going to focus on with extension programming is the practical and applicable aspects of what do I do? Call 911, get out the valuables, you know, all of these things that you know, again, it might be really interesting to know how combustion works, but that's not going to be something that we linger on through the body of our presentation, because that isn't the most important thing that you need to know as someone who's in a house that's on fire. And then we're going to recap our main points at the end and leave you with some action items or some next steps or some things that you can take away. The length of the presentation and audience composition should guide your preparation. You know, I know enough about myself and my presentation style that 20 slides is about an hour presentation for me. And so if a group calls and says, we want a 20-minute presentation or we want a 30-minute presentation, and I walk in armed with my 20-slide, hour-long presentation, that's not going to work. By the same token, if they want a 3-hour presentation and I've only got an hour-long presentation, that's also not going to work. So think about that as you're preparing, and then use your visuals or demonstration based on your comfort level and the length of the presentation. Again, a 20-minute informal presentation is probably not something that you want to walk in armed with a ton of slides, and you may want to try to adopt a more informal tone and just kind of speak from a handout or have a conversation with the audience about the topic that you've done. And don't let your slides distract you. So one of the things that I will sometimes notice with myself, especially if I'm getting nervous or if I feel like I'm not connecting really well with the audience, is I'll start to read my slides, or I'll start to stumble over what my slides say instead of what is coming out of my mouth. Don't let your visuals be a distraction, you know, and at the same time, be careful that your visuals aren't distracting. So one of the blessings and curses of something like PowerPoint, or if you're a Mac person in Keynote, is that you can put all kinds of animations and transitions and all this fancy stuff in it that makes a really great visual, but it can distract from your message, and it can also distract you as a presenter. Like if each point is an animation and you have to click to get each one, I find more often than not, I'll trip over that because I'm wanting to move to the next slide and another bullet comes up. So I try to minimize that in my presentations. And with any of our stuff, I know the things that I develop usually don't incorporate that kind of thing, but if you're working with and through your county extension office to go out and do a presentation and you think you're going to stumble over those animations, work with him or her to remove some of those, to try to get a slimmed down version that you're going to be more comfortable presenting. When you're talking to an audience, it really is more than just broadcasting a message, even though it can feel that way sometimes, especially if you're on a stage and removed from the audience. It can feel like it is a one-way conversation, and in many ways it is, but it doesn't have to be. You can still pay attention to how your audience is responding, how your audience is connecting, if your audience is connecting. Maybe they're not. So that it makes you a more informed and better presenter. Your information isn't going to change necessarily, but your style may change. So when I'm at the front of the room giving a presentation, I can say something, which is that, you know, first block in our circle here, and then the audience hears it, okay? But they don't just hear what I'm saying. They hear it in the context of what they already know. They hear it in the context of what they already believe. They hear it in the context of whether the chair they're sitting in is hard and they're hungry and the room is hot and they don't want to be here. And so that affects how they receive and understand and even respond to what I've just told them. And then they provide feedback. And as a presenter, I can react to that. So if I notice that the audience all looks sad, or they're crying, or they look nauseous, or something like that, I know that I need to change what I'm doing to get them back with me, that the content isn't connecting, that I as the speaker am not connecting, or, you know, if they're all leaning forward and turning their heads like they can't hear me, maybe I need to speak up. Maybe I need to check the sound system to make sure that the message I'm sending is getting across. But I can watch them nod their head yes, or I can watch them nod their head no, and know whether I'm connecting with them, and that may change how I present the information. Maybe I throw in a joke or a personal story or something to reconnect with the audience and try to get them back with me. But it is in this kind of observational speaking where, you know, I put out a message and then I look to see how they're responding to it and giving me feedback, and I can react to it, and then the cycle starts all over again. But it is in this way that even though there really is just a one-way broadcast going on, I can still, quote unquote, hear what the audience is telling me about the message and whether it's resonating with them. And then as a speaker, I can do something to help get back on track with them. So where did it all go wrong? Well, that's a really great question, and if I knew the answer to that, I would go ahead and tell you so that you could be prepared for it. But there are a few things that we can surmise about maybe where it all goes wrong, and one of it is attitudes. So, you know, oftentimes, you know, the Extension Service doesn't really wade into necessarily unpopular or controversial arguments, but sometimes people come to presentations or a situation or a topic and they already believe something, even though it's wrong. One of the fun things I do when I do a presentation about you know, misinformation is we talk about Dr. Mom, and don't ever tell my mother that I tell you this, but Dr. Mom often doesn't have the really best information. So my mother is still convinced that if you have a nosebleed, you should pinch your nose and tilt your head back. Medical science tells us that if you have a nosebleed, you should pinch your nose and tilt your head forward. And the reason that is because you don't want to choke by having your head tilted back. You want to, you know, tilt your head forward so that you reduce your risk of choking. So if someone comes to the presentation and I'm talking about how to stop a nosebleed or what to do with the nosebleed, and they believe with all their heart and all their mind, because they've been told for their whole life that when you have a nosebleed, you tilt your head back, and I'm trying to convince them that you tilt your head forward, I may never make any inroads with those people. And that's an attitude that is interfering with us connecting. Information level the same way. And this has to go with like jargon and technical terms and acronyms and initialisms. And so an example might be, you know, if you go out and do one of our Better Living for Texans program and you're talking to an audience about BLT as a SNAP Ed program funded by HHSC with support from USDA, NIFA, those things don't mean very much to a whole lot of people. And sure, it's important to give them context, but, you know, the better is, you know, Better Living for Texans is a supplemental nutrition assistance program educational opportunity that's funded through the Texas Health and Human Services Commission with support from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Again, maybe that context is important, maybe it isn't, but if you're going to give that context, try not to speak in the alphabet soup that we often, you know, get caught up in. And when you go back to your industry or your peer group or whomever, you probably have your own speech that everybody understands, but when you go to a new group, they may not. Communication skills are important, and that's what we're talking about today. Social systems, you know, again, people who come from different backgrounds may receive different information differently, and sensory perception, whether people can see well or hear well or interact well with the the materials can all make a difference in how that information is received. Again, I don't know that I have easy answers for you for how to mitigate some of these, but there are things you can be aware of as you try to connect with your audience and try to troubleshoot maybe what you're talking about, how you're saying it, and why you might not be connecting with the audience. So in addition to public speaking being a hard element of what we do as education professionals and what you'll do in helping the Extension Service leverage its outreach and education, one of the hardest things to do is to explain who you are and get in the door, to introduce yourself and to introduce your program and your topic and convince someone that you need to be allowed to come in and do a presentation. Now, this is different from if someone calls and says, hi, can you come do a presentation on X, this date and time, and blah, blah, blah. This is if maybe you're cold calling a site that you know would be really great to have the information. And one of the ways to help get your point across in a really clear and concise manner is known as 2793. This was developed in Vermont, actually by their legislature, to try to help them make really quick and effective, persuasive points on the fly. So help them really refine what they wanted people to know about a topic or an issue or a bill or a piece of legislation that they wanted to get across in a really clear and concise manner. And so 2793 is 27 words or less in 9 seconds or less with 3 points or less. And you know, this isn't a method to try to write your life story, or maybe it is. If you're super windy and you want to tell somebody your life story, maybe this is a really great way to get that point across. But it really is just to get in the door. You know, sometimes you'll hear this called an elevator speech, or because we're focused on health and wellness, let's call it a stairwell speech, because I know that you're going to, you know, use the stairs now for physical activity purposes rather than taking the elevator. And so, but the idea is, you know, if you just had a brief interaction with someone, if you only had a few minutes or a few seconds to tell someone who you are or what you do or something about yourself, how would you do that? And so 2793 helps us focus that. So when I thought about a 2793 for our time here today, I came up with this. Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service is the outreach and community education arm of the Texas A&M system. We help Texans better their lives through practical, research-based education. And so, you know, that's 27 words. I didn't time myself, but we're going to go ahead and give me the benefit of the doubt that it took me 9 seconds to get it out. And I've got 3 points or less. I wanted you to know that we're community outreach and education. We're part of the Texas A&M system, and we help Texans better their lives. So those are my 3 points. And so Kathy says they lost me, but I'm assuming since I'm the only person that I'm hearing that from, that sound is not an issue. So I'm going to keep going. But I didn't try to tell you everything about the Extension Service. I didn't try to tell you all the different ways that we try to help better the lives. I didn't go into some long diatribe about what it means to be research-based education. I just gave you, you know, a little bit of information about the agency I work for and what we do and how we do it. Sometimes, though, we need to make a broader point. You know, we need to be able to, they may say, oh, tell me more. Or, you know, I'm going into a group and I'm going to give them this presentation on, you know, how to talk to your doctor or something. And I need to be able to introduce myself. I need to be able to introduce my role. I need to be able to tell briefly about the agency just so we can establish some legitimacy with why we're here and why you should be listening to me. And so in that way, we'll take a kind of broader approach to that, okay? So we'll begin with a setup to introduce myself and my role, and then we'll position the agency a little bit. We'll use facts and figures to give a big picture. And then we'll talk about some of the things the agency does well and the part that I play in it. And then, you know, we'll leave a little room for questions, okay? Or maybe even deliberately ask, do you understand what I'm talking about? And so for that, I put together this. And this is actually basically how I introduce myself when I go do a presentation. Hi, I'm Andy Crocker, and I'm the Extension Program Specialist for Gerontology and Health with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. AgriLife Extension is the outreach and community education arm of the Texas A&M University System. The Extension Service is a federally mandated mission of America's land-grant colleges and universities. You'll find the Extension Service in all 50 states and all the U.S. territories, and in fact, here in Texas, we're in 250 of the 254 counties. Many people know us best for our programs in agriculture and horticulture. We have very robust programs in a variety of topics like health, nutrition, and youth development. And if you don't know where your county extension office is or who your county extension agents are, find out. They can be a resource to you in a variety of areas. And then I might add in a little bit about myself. So I'll tell them, you know, I'm from Louisiana and that I went to Baylor and that I like a relaxed presentation, you know, just to kind of establish that I am a real person. You know, I'm not just here as a talking head or something. But, you know, that builds out a little on what my 2793 is. It builds out kind of a broader context of who I am, what my agency is, what we do, where we are. And then it also, in that, dispels some myths because truly, you know, many people only think about the Extension Service with agriculture or horticulture. And true, that's where our roots are, but, you know, we do a variety of things and we do it very well. We just don't kind of have the same name recognition for some of our other areas in all parts of the state as some of our other programs. And so now it's your turn. And this is the part where, you know, we've got another presenter coming up next, but following that, you're going to have a little bit of downtime to work on your 2793. There's a worksheet as part of your handout. It looks something like this. And it's going to help you craft your 2793. And there's a space at the top to write out, you know, a whole thing. So the way I write is if I have to do something for 27 words, I'll write out everything I want to say, and then I'll start taking things away or figuring out how to rephrase sentences to whittle it down to what I want it to be. So even when I typed out my 2793 for this presentation, I typed out everything I wanted to say, and then I edited it down to get it to where I wanted it to be. And I find that that's a more effective way, for me at least, than trying to go in and just put 27 words together, because that can be pretty daunting. But figure out what you want to do, but use your top box as kind of a scratch pad, and then use your bottom box as a refined statement. But think about these things. Who's your audience going to be for this particular message? What might the appeal be to their direct self-interest? What do you want them to think or understand about your issue? How do you want them to feel about what you've said? And what do you want your listener to do after they hear your message? And, you know, for our purposes today, and to make it a little easier, because even though you've been through the training and all of that, maybe you still don't have a really great grasp on the agency overall, or what your particular interest is going to be with the Master Wellness Volunteer Program. So maybe your 2793, for the purpose of these exercises, is to convince someone to move to your county, or to move to the town in which you live, in your county. Do something playful, or if you're here as part of a job, work, convince someone to come to work for your employer using your 2793, just so you can kind of make quick work of it this afternoon. And then you're going to practice that with your group there in the room with you. So do give it some thought. And again, use that top box for kind of a scratch pad, and then use the bottom box for kind of refining your message. And then the other thing is I want you to practice crafting your broader message. So using the next page in that handout, and it looks something like this. Think about, 5 things that you know about Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service and the Master Wellness Volunteer Program. And then think about what are 5 things that this program means to you. So again, if you're not quite integrated enough to be able to come up with 5 and 5, do it about your hometown or do it about your work site or something, just so you can craft that broader message. But truly, before you go out and kind of take the leap into talking in public on behalf of the agency to deliver that educational message, go back to these exercises and craft your 2793, for your role as the Master Wellness Volunteer. Build out your broader message based on that, relating your role to the agency. And, I'm not proud, steal mine if you want. Take what I have as part of mine and make it to fit you and your needs, so that it helps introduce yourself to the audience and let them know, what you're about and why you're there today, and help introduce a great message to them. So with that, I know that was pretty quick and pretty direct, but I'd like to open it up for any questions if you have any. There are a lot of great supports out there for you. And again, the hard part, the coming up with the message, the sound information, the way it's organized, and making sure that there are educational objectives and things that can be evaluated to look at knowledge gain or intended behavior change. A lot of that is going to be baked into the mix already by delivering Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service or any Extension Service programming to an audience. And so some of it truly is just you getting comfortable with your new role with the agency as a Master Wellness Volunteer, with yourself as a speaker, figuring out what works for you, what doesn't work for you, and then, looking at other details that are going to help guarantee your success, like who the audience is, what they're expecting, how long do I have, and all of those kind of details, because the content, for the most part, with our materials is already there for you. So that's one less thing you have to worry about when you step out on behalf of the agency to provide education. And we're excited for you, and we're going to do what we need to do to help ensure your success.